Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Elsevier Engineering webinar series. We hope that you, your family, and colleagues are all safe and healthy during these challenging times. My name is Mark Petrachko, and I'm a customer consultant for the corporate South and Western United States for the Elsevier Engineering team. It's my privilege today to introduce Dr. Chris Cogswell, my very inspiring and insightful colleague at Elsevier, will present for us today an enlightening topic, heat transfer, refining your search to meet your market needs. But before we get started, I'd like to launch a brief poll question. And if you'd please give us an idea about your engineering village or Knovel usage, I'd really appreciate that. So if you could just select the appropriate poll response, be really thankful. Okay, so it seems we've got a pretty even split here on the results. We've got some usage and some not usage. So I think you've got a fair and reasonable amount to go on there, Chris. So without any further ado, if you do have any questions, please put them in the Q&A queue. And if time allows, we'll pull them up and have Chris answer the questions at the end. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks, Mark. So today we're going to be talking about heat transfer, refining your search to meet market needs, and the use of the tools Knovel and Engineering Village to help you in that aspect. All right. So first, a little bit of background on me. So like Mark said, my name is Chris Cogswell. I'm originally from the University of New Hampshire, where I got my Bachelor's of Science in Chemical Engineering and Philosophy before joining Northeastern University for a PhD in chemical engineering, where I did work on the creation of nanomaterials, including some work on the creation of coatings, so thermal barrier coatings and things like that using nanomaterials. So before we get into the tools themselves, we're going to do a little bit of a heat transfer crash course. And I don't know anyone better to talk about heat transfer with than a cat. Now, like all good engineers, we are going to make a couple of assumptions first about this cat to talk a little bit about our heat transfer skills and knowledge. So there's three primary heat transfer mechanisms. There is thermal conduction, which is heat transfer due to the collision of particles with each other. That is kind of dominant at solid-solid interfaces and is an example of something from your everyday life of a hot cup of coffee on your hand, heating it up. Thermal convection is heat transfer due to fluid flowing over the surface or boundary of two phases. This is dominant at gas or liquid solid interfaces where there's a difference in velocity. An example of that is a fan blowing in a hot room, cooling you off. And then, of course, there's thermal radiation, which is heat transfer due to electromagnetic radiation. And the perfect example of that is the sun heating you up on a hot day. Now, in terms of some of the applications of heat transfer and R&D technology that we'll be talking about today, we're going to talk a little bit here about thermal protection and coating. So, for example, in aerospace, we're going to talk about the design of electrical components in consumer goods. So, we're all working from home with our laptops and things. The last thing you want is to have a laptop that gets so hot that no one wants to use it. And then, of course, we can do some searches around biomedical applications, things like either the way that heat transfers through the body itself and ways that we can use that for to increase our ability to heal from different things, or actually applications where we cause heat transfer and that leads to things like the stoppage of tumor growth or killing of cancer cells. So to begin our searches here today, we are going to begin in Engineering Village. So Engineering Village is a database, or it's a collection of databases that allow us to search abstracts and also find indexing and other taxonomical tools that we've added on top of those databases to make the search for different fields really interesting and really valuable. So the first thing I'll do is I'm going to run a search in Compendex here, and I can just start off by searching heat transfer, right? Something simple. I'll run my search. And so the first thing I find is there are just a tremendous amount of records. Now, these are too many records for me to ever read myself in my day-to-day life, or probably over the course of a lifetime even. So what I can actually start to do is facet my search down so that I can get a good overview of, well, what's going on in the world of heat transfer. Now, Compendex is going to be looking primarily here. We're going to be looking at Compendex for journal articles. I am going to want to see those, so I'll limit it to that search. And the first thing I always like to do is look at the year. So here, I'm going to click up on this button. It'll open up a chart. And now I can click here to view the maximum here, so all the data that we have. And you can see that heat transfer has been a pretty consistent theme in the engineering literature since about 1985. But it's been slowly increasing until recent years when we really saw a big increase in the amount of articles published on the topic of heat transfer. All right, that's super interesting. So why don't I look now at the last couple of years only? So maybe I want to limit my search to what is going on in the world of heat transfer right now. Okay, so I'll click on those. And so now here I'm down to 47,000 records, or about 48,000. I can now start to look at a little bit more content for myself. So for example here, I'm going to start on classification code. And I want to see what topics are being published alongside heat transfer articles. So when we're working on heat transfer, we're looking at fluid flow, thermodynamics, material science, chemical operations, heat exchangers, mathematics, nanotechnology, chemical products, all kinds of things. All right, well, I personally am interested in nanotechnology. Right, that was what we said was occurring inside of those thermal coatings and also in electrical components. So I'm going to click here into nanotechnology. Now I'm down to 6,500 records. And now if I look at the controlled vocabulary, I can get a very good sense of what is actually going on, what kind of publications are coming out in terms of heat transfer work. So we can see here that we're looking at nanofluidics, nanoparticles, thermal conductivity studies, certain materials that are being used, the performance of heat transfer materials or their coefficients, different things like the Nusselt number or Reynolds number for the fluid flow itself, studies on graphene, all kinds of different interesting things. Now, since I'm working in the world of nanomaterials, I can actually also limit my search by physical property. What I mean by that is I can actually run a numeric search. So for example here, maybe I am interested in a specific size. And so here I'm going to go down to nanometer. And I'm going to say that I want to be between 50 and let's say 500 nanometers. I'll refine my search. And now I'm down to only 251 records. So now I have a much more manageable list of papers and articles that I can actually dig through and see if there's something interesting there for me. So for example, here we're looking at experimental and numerical study of forced convection heat transfer in different internally ribbed tubes. All right, so I'm going to click on this. And in the abstract itself here, I can see the abstract. I can see their authors' affiliations, where they were publishing from, their names, and who the affiliated author is. I can also see here those main headings, controlled terms, uncontrolled terms, and classification codes. I can look here at the PlumX metrics to see how often this paper has been cited or read inside of different tools. And I can actually also, if I wanted to, go down to the detail view here and look more fully at some other things, including that journal information itself. I can look at the funding, if there was funding text, or details of that funding, where this paper was funded from, and all of those different things. All right, I'm going to go back to my results here. Now, since I'm signed in here, one other thing I can do is I can go to my search history. And so here I began my search here at heat transfer within all. I can click on this. And what I can actually do is choose to search inside another database. So here I'm going to choose to search in InSpec and run that search. Oh, something going on here with my engineering village today. So here, if I run my search in InSpec, now I have 220,000 records. Now, InSpec and Compendex are different databases. InSpec focuses more on sort of electrical engineering, physics, mathematics, those sorts of things, whereas Compendex is a broader overview of the engineering topic. Now here, what I can do all those same kind of things I did before. I can look at a document type, the controlled vocabulary. I can look at authors or their affiliations, where they're publishing from in terms of their country, the publisher, all those different things. But one thing that's really interesting in InSpec that's on Engineering Village is if I click into here, and then I actually go through onto one of these topics. So here, for example, heat transfer. If I click on this, I can actually see what are known as InSpec analytics. This is a tool that InSpec has come out with very recently, and it only has this sort of functionality on the Engineering Village platform. What this allows us to see is very nicely some of those trends and other co-occurring concepts and terms that come up with the topic of heat transfer. We can actually see them here, and then we can actually utilize that in our searches later on. We can learn things about those data sets in the database field itself. So for example, here, I can see here for heat transfer, this is the way that that control term has changed over time since 2013. I can see that there's a 67% increase in the amount of articles published. So heat transfer is a hot topic right now. I can see what are the co-occurring concepts that come up. And we can see here that primarily that increase in articles in 2013 to 2018 was driven by an increase in the amount of articles that co-occurred with numerical analysis, heat exchangers, computational fluid dynamics or CFD, flow simulation, pipe flow, right? All of these things have to do with computational fluid dynamics. So I can see that that is a big advent here for this field. And if I'm working on a project that is looking at heat transfer, I probably want to know something about computational fluid dynamics. I can see the subject classifications that exist. Again, those top organizations, journals, conferences, narrower terms that might be of interest for me, and also related subject classifications. And so if I wanted to look at any of these, I could click here. It would bring up the InSpec analytics for those as well. All right. So Engineering Village gives us a really nice way of looking at the broader overview of the journal articles, but it also actually, depending on the database we have, can be really useful in looking at the patents that have been either asked for or actually granted in different places. So for example here, if I look at the US patents, EP patents and world patents, and I search for heat transfer, I can click in, and I can do the same kind of faceting that I did before. Right, I can see who are those inventors of these patents, who are the major assignees, right? So if I'm doing work at an academic institution, a government lab, or even at a company, who is it that I'm going to be competing with in terms of actual product and engineering output, right? It's going to be GE, IBM, Fujifilm, Canon, Eastman, Mitsubishi, Daikin, Carrier, right? All these companies that make a lot of sense as they're producing consumer goods, electronic components, or they are existing in aerospace or large machinery, right? So this all makes perfect sense for me. Okay. Now, if I wanted to have an alert created for any of the searches I did before in Engineering Village, since I'm signed in, what I could do here is just go to create an alert. I could save my search. I can share it with my colleagues, or I can even create an RSS feed that'll tell me when new articles, new patents, new whatever is brought into these databases and actually pings them. So it actually shows them, or rather it tells me when something new has come up that might be of interest to me. Okay. Now let's say though that I'm interested in another field of heat transfer that we didn't really touch on just yet. So I'm going to search in Compendex first. Actually, let's just search in everything first. And I'm going to search heat transfer biomedical. Now I can see here that there's 6,500 records approximately that fit that. Again, if I wanted to, I can click into my databases. So I'm going to choose Compendex for now and limit it there. And I can now see here, in terms of the controlled vocabulary for that, of biomedical applications for heat transfer, we're looking at tissues, mass transfer, again, mathematical models, the use of nanoparticles, computer simulation, and finite element methods. Very interesting stuff there. I can, of course, dig down. I can see here, well, who's funding this kind of work, right? It's the NSF of China, the National Science Foundation, National Institutes of Health, fundamental research funds for the central universities, the Department of Energy, all these different places. I can also see here where are the affiliations of this work coming out of. So where are the big institutions doing work on biomedical applications of heat transfer, right? The University of Wollongong, see the City University of Hong Kong, Ocean University of China, Tsinghua University. And if I wanted to, let's say I wanted to specifically be working in the United States, I could click down here, click on the United States, and I could say limit it there. And then further dig in here, right? So now in the United States, I have a lot of co-occurring authors that also have affiliations with China or are working with China. I can look here again at those affiliations. You see here the University of South Florida, University of Michigan, University of South Florida, again in different departments, University of Tennessee, all these different places. Okay. Now, if I wanted to run a search like this, but now I'm interested in more actual application style information, right? So, okay, maybe I have enough journal articles, but I'm still interested in heat transfer and biomedical applications. What I can actually do is I'm going to go back to my search history and go to my search for heat transfer biomedical. And I can actually click here and say run a Knovel search. And what that will do is bring me over to Knovel and give me Knovel content that exists inside of my subscription for Knovel through my institution. And actually from Knovel, I can go back to Compendex as well by clicking here. Right, so here I did heat transfer biomedical. If I click on this, what comes up is my search in Compendex, and then I just run it. Now, the nice thing here about Knovel is it gives me access to all kinds of different pieces of content, right? It gives me books and text, definitions. If I actually go here to a more broader topic, just heat transfer itself, you can see that we have 400 plus graphs and tables, 130 different equations, all kinds of definitions, worksheets to help people utilize those sorts of things. But probably most importantly for your engineers and your users are going to be here these refined by concepts options. So I click down here, I can see, well, what concepts come up in terms of heat transfer that we have on Knovel. So maybe, for example, I am interested in heat recovery in terms of heat transfer. I can click on this, and it will build my search down further. And now I can see all kinds of content that I have available to me. I can also, of course, go back to my main search here on my main Knovel bar. And then run my searches through this. However, if I'm doing actual heat transfer work, one of the most important things for me is going to be getting data that will fit the work that I need. So for example here, if I go to property search and open up my material property search, I can actually run something here in two different ways. So first off, I could search for a material. So for example, maybe I'm interested in titanium, right? Some kind of titanium material. I'll search titanium and I have 1,700 different results. And then what I can actually do is search here for different properties that maybe I want to be looking for. So for example, I maybe know I need the heat transfer coefficient. Did I spell coefficient wrong? I think I did. I just run heat transfer. The thermal conductivity. Let's do that one. So here it comes up, right? So I can click on this, pull it over. And here I can see my results. I can also here choose different variables. So for example, maybe I know that I want my titanium thermal conductivity to be between some values, right? Maybe I know that I need thermal conductivity with temperature. So I can go here for my thermodynamic variables and just look for temperature. And so I want them to appear together as co-occurring terms on a table or chart. So I can click in here, and now I can find that piece of content that I need. I can also, of course, if I wanted to do heat transfer here, if I ran this search, we can look here at the equations that are also available for me so that I can know how to use different parts of this to do this sort of thing. So for example here, nucleate boiling and convective vapor heat transfer, I can click on this and it'll show me the equations that list on that, how to use them. It'll give me a little write-up here on how to do this, and then I can actually manipulate the data, the equation itself, and run that search. So here it tells me how to calculate the heat transfer coefficient for nucleate and convective boiling. Those are the equations that I would use. I can open this up and I can see the different pieces of info that I can vary here, for example. Right, so maybe I know that this isn't 350, but it is 650, and then it'll change my ultimate answer. So in terms of engineering for heat transfer design, or even doing market research on heat transfer applications or analysis, we have a lot of tools that are available for you. There really is just so much content. It could take many of these series to go over everything that's available to you between Knovel and Engineering Village. But I hope this was useful. I hope it was a nice look quickly into some of the applications and things that you can do searches on and some of the information you can get out of our tools. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Chris. That was very informative. If you do have any questions, please add them to the chat, and we'll be glad to have Chris answer any of those questions. Also, I'm going to be launching a second poll here. So if you could please take a few minutes and give us your feedback on these two very quick questions, we'd appreciate it. Okay, well, thank you for answering those. Chris, I'm not seeing any questions in the Q&A. So if again, if someone has any questions, please feel free to put them in. You did get a QCat comment, which is expected and mandatory, but it is a QCat.
Thank you so much for that. It is actually a surprisingly much more challenging question, how the heat transfers through the cat. There's a lot of stuff going on there,
Yeah.
which is a lot of fun.
Well, if there aren't any questions, we wanted to also tell you about some upcoming webinars that'll be coming up in the next couple of weeks. Next Thursday at noon Eastern, we'll be looking at utilizing the collaboration features of our engineering tools. The following week, it'll be review remote access options, since many people are working remotely from either their schools or their work locations. Then following that, we'll be looking at e-learning, integrating Knovel content into your CMS. And then to round out the month, engineering management series, we'll be looking at Six Sigma, lean, and agile work environments with Knovel. Again, each of these will begin at noon Eastern. If you do not have a link to any of these in order to register, please reach out to either Chris or myself or your customer consultant directly. If you don't know who your customer consultant is, feel free to reach out to Chris Cogswell. It's c.cogswell, C-O-G-S-W-E-L-L, at elsevier.com, and we'll be glad to get you that. We've also got a list of, there it is. Thank you. Chris put it up here in the chat. So again, thank you so much for your time. Do have a safe and enjoyable July 4th weekend, and we look forward to your presence at one of the upcoming events. Thanks, everyone.